could barely walk down the hallway of the school. My thinness made my body look like a skeleton, with jutting ribs, sunken cheekbones, and huge bruises under my eyes. Then I saw my classmate ahead of me. "Paul," he asked in horror. What was wrong with me? I clenched my fists in anger. "It's all your fault." It all started when he transferred to our class a few weeks ago. Paul immediately attracted the girls' attention. A tall, dark-haired guy with brown eyes, and he looked older than his years. It was love at first sight. But Paul wouldn't date a fat girl like me. Because of my weight, I had never had a boyfriend. I tried to lose weight. I dieted, went to the gym, but in vain. Even doctors shrugged their shoulders. I had a bad metabolism. I almost accepted that no boy would look at me. But then Paul started hitting on me, winking at me, complimenting me, and once he even saved me from bullies who called me fat. He said I was very beautiful and I shouldn't listen to anyone. No one had ever been so kind to me. I liked Paul so much that after a week of dating, I finally decided to tell him. Here goes nothing. After school, I asked Paul to stay. My heart was pounding with excitement, and I blurted out, "I like you." Paul was silent for a long time, and I was literally burning with shame, but then he smiled and said he liked me too. I was dizzy with happiness. But Paul immediately added that he would only be with me on one condition: if I lost weight. Something snapped inside me. But I would do anything for Paul. Right after school, I went to the gym. In the middle of the road, a promoter stopped me and handed me a flyer. "Hey beauty, weight loss courses have opened here. Here's an invitation to a free session." I hesitated, but the promoter assured me, "A week and you're a model." If it was for free, then it was worth a try. I thanked the promoter and went to the specified address. The entrance to the studio was in the courtyard and led to the basement. Inside, a nice girl met me and immediately invited me to a session. It was led by a man in a black hoodie who introduced himself as a teacher. I left the session an hour later and immediately ran home to weigh myself. But as soon as I saw the number, everything swam before my eyes. -3 kilos? I double-checked several times. Wow, the courses were working. I was so excited that the next day, I immediately ran to the session. But the manager stopped me, saying that the subsequent sessions cost $1,000. But this was all my savings. There was no choice. I wanted to lose weight so much that when I got home, I took out my stash and frantically counted it. Damn, not enough. I was almost desperate when I found more bills in my jacket pocket. Got it. Mom came home from work and asked me where I was going. Panic gripped me. I immediately blurted out that I was going out with my friends. My ears burned. It was the first time I had lied so blatantly to my mom, but I couldn't tell her about the courses. She wouldn't understand. After giving all the money to the manager, I went to the second session. And after that, I immediately ran to the weigh scales. Another -3 kilos. I also saw the result in the mirror. My belly got flatter and my thighs were getting thinner. Even Paul at school said I was getting prettier and hugged me. My classmates blushed with envy. And I was over the moon. I should lose a little more weight, and we would be together. But where could I get the money? At school, I only thought about it until I realized that I had only one option: to ask my parents. At home, I walked over to my mom, biting my lip. If only she would agree. But as soon as I started talking, Mom interrupted. Money didn't grow on trees. I immediately went to my room, slamming the door behind me. She never understood me. But Paul would not wait. He would find a beauty and all was lost. Stop. And if I stole the money, a chill ran through my body. I never stole anything, but my parents themselves are to blame. They couldn't understand me. While they were in the kitchen, I crept into their bedroom and opened my mom's bag. The wallet was still there. With trembling hands, I took out the money, and then I heard footsteps approaching. I felt a rush of heat. I hurriedly shoved the wallet back in and put the money in my pocket. Immediately, the door swung open. Mom looked at me sternly and asked me what I was doing. Swallowing, I managed to say that I wanted to apologize to her. I gave her a quick peck on the cheek and ran outside. I couldn't wait to lose more weight. On the session, I gave all the money to the manager. Although I felt bad, thoughts about losing weight and Paul occupied my head. The manager took me to a session. After that, I rushed home to the weigh scales again. -3. I lost a lot of weight. And I could finally date Paul. But he shook his head. You're still not skinny enough. I almost fell over, but where could I get the money? I felt overwhelmed. Paul and I could never be together. I was thinking of borrowing from my classmates, but no one wanted to lend me that much. There was only one thing left to do, steal from my parents again. In the evening, after waiting for my mom to leave the bedroom, I slipped inside. My heart was pounding. Where was this wallet? I looked around the room and noticed it on the nightstand. Great! I immediately grabbed the wallet as the door opened. My heart sank when I saw Mom's furious expression. It's not what you think. Mom shouted that I was taking something forbidden because I had lost so much weight, and I was sneaking cash out of the wallet. I was so hurt to hear that. Mom added, if this happened again, she would send me to the clinic for treatment. I almost burst into tears and immediately ran to my room. In the morning, I went to school in a terrible mood. Paul wouldn't be with me, all in vain. But then a guy came up to me and exhaled. What a slim little thing. This was the promoter who told me about the courses. What if he helped me? I asked if he could lend me money, and the promoter was surprised. Where could he get this amount from? His words made me droop. The promoter, noticing this, smiled encouragingly and asked me why I needed the money. Almost crying, I blurted it out. Then he frowned. But how did the session itself go? I shrugged. The teacher in the hoodie took me to the room, and after that, I didn't remember anything, but the main thing was the weight went away. Leo, that was the promoter's name, looked puzzled and asked again, what do you mean you don't remember? This is all terribly strange. He himself never met with the boss, only invited the girl to a trial session. What if this was dangerous for the health? I thought about it. Maybe Leo was right. I was so obsessed with losing weight that I didn't even ask why my weight was going down. What if there was something illegal there? It was impossible not to remember the whole session. Leo looked me straight in the eye. Let's put a brooch with a camera and find out what's going on there. I nodded immediately. I wanted to know what was going on in this strange center. But where could I get money for a session? My parents would put me in a clinic if I said a word about the courses. Leo then asked if they could hold a session on credit. I thought about it. The manager knew that this was not my first session, and she could be persuaded, but we would play a scene. Leo bought a camera brooch, and we attached it to my blouse. I went to another session. The manager greeted me with a smile. I started to rummage through my pockets and suddenly froze in fright. Damn, I left my wallet at home. I dialed Leo and said in a sweet voice, Daddy, I left my wallet at home. Will you pay for my session later? Leo replied that he would do anything for the sake of his beloved daughter. The manager was silent for a long time, and I already thought that nothing would work out, but then she nodded and said to go in. I went into the dark room, where the teacher was sitting, as usual, in a hoodie. I sank into a chair, and after that, I didn't remember anything. When I went outside, Leo was waiting for me, looking excited. We sat on a bench in the park, plugged the brooch into the laptop, and watched. In the video, the teacher in the hoodie started talking to me in a monotone, and I started to pass out. As soon as I fell asleep, the teacher took off his hoodie. My breath caught in my throat. Paul? While I was under hypnosis, he gave me some kind of decoction to drink. Leo and I exchanged glances. So Paul was a fraud. And he put girls into hypnosis, and I liked him. And suddenly a skater bumped into us. In his hands, he was holding a glass of juice, which spilled right on the laptop. It immediately crackled, and the screen went blank. I couldn't believe it. We lost the recording. Tears welled up in my eyes. Paul would cheat on girls with impunity, and I wouldn't do anything about it. Leo immediately put his arm around me and told me that we would bring Paul to light. He had a plan. The next day, Leo helped me get my makeup done. He pulled me into a corset, sculpted the bones on my face and arms, and painted the bruises under my eyes. When I saw myself in the mirror, I was horrified. The Walking Dead. So, I was walking exhausted down the hallway, barely dragging my feet along the wall. Paul saw me, froze in fright, and asked what was wrong with me. It's all your fault, I shouted. I saw everything. Hypnosis doesn't work on me. Paul turned pale and blurted out that he didn't want to bring me to this state. We needed to call an ambulance. Got it. I straightened abruptly, showing him the recorder. Now I had the confession. He was not going anywhere. At that moment, Leo came around the corner and sternly snapped that it would be better for Paul to go to the police and confess. Paul looked at us with wild eyes and then abruptly took off for the exit. No, Leo and I ran after him, but Paul was much faster than us. Just as I was losing hope, the police suddenly burst into the school. They immediately detained a reluctant Paul, and Leo whispered that he had decided to call the police in advance. I looked at him gratefully. What would I do without you? Paul's trial soon took place. It turned out that he was not a student at all, but a 35-year-old man who had been wanted by the police for a long time. He deliberately pretended to be a student and flirted with fat girls, persuading them to lose weight and lured them to his sect. Under hypnosis, he inspired them to come again and again, giving all the money. Mom said she was very proud of me, and I did find a boyfriend in the person of Leo. And even though I later gained weight again, my health was much more important to him than my weight. And if a guy is more concerned about your appearance, does he really love you? Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I was lying in a hospital bed in the dirty basement when Rick the surgeon appeared out of the darkness. He showed me a picture of the girl and told me that tomorrow I would look the same. This was my 12th plastic surgery. Soon my eyes were darkening from the usual anesthesia, and I passed out. In the morning, I woke up in my room and with difficulty went to the mirror. When I took off the bandages, it was a new face in the reflection, one in one, like the girl in the photo. Thank God this was my last case. I would start a new life and no more surgeries. I opened the closet to change, and in the corner sat my exact copy. The girl in the photo named Zoe, only bound and with her mouth taped shut. She was in shock. Sure, I looked like her crazy twin. She looked at me in horror, but I just took the clothes and locked the door. Then Rick, my plastic surgeon and part-time boss, came in. He showed a picture of the guy and said coldly that it was Dean. I had to disguise myself as his girlfriend, sneak into his office, and take the red folder with the documents. Rick gave me the phone of the girl who was sitting in the closet, the keys, and sent me to the case. Half an hour later, I was in a taxi going to this Dean, and suddenly I saw myself in the rearview mirror and realized that after so many operations, I no longer remembered what my real face looked like. And then I started to remember how it all started. Since childhood, as long as I can remember, I've always been in the world of crime. My dad was a serious authority figure among the bandits, and he always took me with him on various cases. But when I was 16, my father was killed by some mobsters. Apparently, Dad owed the money that was lying at our house. I decided not to return them to the mafia. I had to live on something. I did deny myself anything, and the money quickly ran out. But soon the mafias demanded them back, and I had already wasted everything. I tried to keep a low profile, but I was being followed, and I realized that the only chance to live a normal life was to change my appearance. I found an ad for plastic surgeon Rick on the darknet, and a week later, we met. Rick seemed surly to me, and when he heard I didn't have any money, he was about to throw me out. But I panicked and confessed that the mafia was looking for me. Rick was silent, and I was afraid to move, but after a pause, he said he would help. I started to thank Rick, but he cut me off and said that he wasn't doing it out of mercy. He had a condition. He would perform plastic surgery on me, and I would have to impersonate other people. I recoiled. Why would he do that? Rick continued. He needed help with his business. I was surprised. With a new face, I would break into different houses and steal, he added dryly. What? The mobsters got rid of my son. You'll have the same fate if you don't help me. Even though I didn't believe in fate, I had no other choice. I'd rather work for a crazy surgeon than fall into the hands of a mobster. We had been living together ever since. Rick gave me face-changing surgeries every month and sent me on missions, but he didn't pay me a penny of what he stole, so I took a percentage of the work myself. This was enough for me to buy clothes and restaurants. Rick still didn't notice I was stealing from him. I was happy with this life, but soon I began to notice that with each surgery, the scars on the skin took longer to heal, and I gradually began to go crazy, and I occasionally heard in my head the voices of the girls whose faces I wore. Then I knew it was time to stop. Last week, I'd been working for Rick for exactly a year. That same day, I went to him and begged him to let me go earlier because I was doing my duty honestly. There was a moment of silence, but then he nodded. Seriously? I asked, surprised and uncertain. Yes, perhaps you deserve your freedom. Rick answered, just one last case and we're even. I agreed without hesitation, of course. So very soon, Rick gave me plastic surgery. Suddenly, I heard the cry of an angry taxi driver. Apparently, I was too deep in my memories that I did not hear how we arrived. I paid and went out near the big house. Well, this was my last case. And then, freedom. My mission was to steal a red folder of documents from this house. Carefully opening the door, I found myself in a small hall. It was so quiet that I jumped when someone called out to me. It was Dean, the owner of the house, and he was cute, tall, and athletic. He hugged me and told me that there was a surprise waiting for his beloved in the living room. I let out a sigh of relief. He didn't suspect anything and thought I was his girlfriend. We sat down at the table. A romantic candlelit dinner was waiting for me there, and Dean was good at courting. But suddenly the smile faded from his face. He stared at my hand. Oh man, I forgot to cover my tattoo with my sleeve. I quickly hid my hands under the table, but my heart was pounding. I couldn't let Dean get suspicious, or I wouldn't get the red folder. Dean looked at me suspiciously. I lied about the tattoo being temporary, but I didn't think he believed me. There was no time to delay. I had to look around the house and find a folder. Honey, will you excuse me? I said and immediately got up from the table. Since the first floor was small, I assumed that the folder with the documents was somewhere upstairs. I carefully climbed the stairs, and at the end of the corridor, I saw an old door. I listened for Dean, but it was all quiet. Then I tiptoed to that door. It was Dean's office. I crept over to the desk to find a red folder, but then it was like an electric shock. I noticed a police badge on the desk. Did that mean Dean was a cop? He must have seen through me by now. At that moment, I heard the stairs creak. Oh no! I barely made it out of the office before I came face to face with Dean. He asked incredulously what I was doing in his office, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. I said I had to leave immediately. After that, I ran as fast as I could down the stairs to the exit. I was so sick of pretending to be someone. When I went home an hour later, Rick was watching TV. I immediately started shouting that he should have said Dean was a cop. But Rick didn't even bat an eye. He got up from the couch, came close to me, and said that if I wanted freedom, I would get him a folder. A lump rose in my throat. Rick could expose me to the mafia at any second, or worse, leave me as a slave forever. I took a deep breath and went to my room. I needed to figure out where the damn folder was. I opened the closet and told Zoe that if she didn't tell me where Dean kept the files, I'd kill her and blame her boyfriend. Zoe begged me not to touch Dean and stammered out that he kept all the files in the desk drawers in his office. Man, why didn't I look in there right away? I taped Zoe's mouth shut and closed the closet. I would get this file out tomorrow and finally get rid of Rick's slavery. In the morning, I was woken up by a call. It was Zoe's phone. I saw Dean's name on the screen. Damn. Dean asked anxiously if I was alright. Why did I run away last night and not come to sleep? Stammering, I apologized and lied that my friend had poisoned herself yesterday. I had to stay with her. I waited tensely for Dean to respond. What if he was trying to trip me up? But Dean asked sympathetically if his help was needed. That was close. I said it was alright and I was going home. I took a sleeping pill and called a taxi. The plan was that I would put Dean to sleep and calmly take out the folder. When I arrived at Dean's, I found him on the stairs in the hallway. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. Dean asked suspiciously when I found a friend, since I had just moved to the city. Heck, I quickly came up with an excuse and immediately offered to watch a movie together. Dean smiled and agreed. While he was choosing a movie, I went to the kitchen to make tea. I was just taking the sleeping pills out of my pocket when my phone rang in my pocket. It was Rick. I decided to call back when Dean was asleep, stirred the powder in the tea, and went into the living room. But Dean was already asleep on the couch. Apparently, he really had been waiting for me all night. I wasted no time in rushing to his office. I needed to deal with everything quickly. While I was going, I decided to call Rick back. What do you have? I'm on the case. But at his words, I froze in place. Zoe ran away. I panicked. But Rick told me to pack up, find the documents, and get out of there. She could show up here at any time, and then Rick and I would be screwed. My new life was at stake. I decided to fight to the end. In the office, I rummaged through all the desk drawers and finally found a red folder. And then I heard the door creak. Dean must have woken up. I decided not to hesitate, and hiding the folder under my jacket, was already going down to the door. Then I saw Zoe sitting next to Dean on the couch. We looked like twins. Dean stared at us in shock. "You can't fight the fate, honey," she whispered to me. But while Dean was recovering from the shock, I ran for the front door. I jumped out on the road, stopped the taxi, and miraculously, I was in the car. Locked the door and shouted to the taxi driver, "Let's go!" He hit the gas and we drove away. When I got home, I immediately threw a red folder on Rick's desk. He only coldly replied, "You were free." I was so happy, but now I needed Rick's help again. I got down on my knees and begged him to make me a new face, for the last time. Any face. Just to get away from Dean. He was a cop. He wouldn't leave me so easily, and I wanted to start all over again. Rick took pity on me and took me to the basement. On the morning after my surgery, my face was terribly sore, but even under the bandages, I was smiling because now this whole nightmare was over. I took off the bandages, but when I unwrapped the last one, I saw a snub nose and plump lips in the reflection of the mirror. A painfully familiar face. Who was it? No, I recognized my real self. I just froze in horror. Why did he set me up like this? Now I would be found and torn to pieces by the mafias who hunted my father. Suddenly the phone vibrated. A message came. "I know that you stole money from me. It's time to pay your debts. You can't fight the fate." And the signature, Rick. My legs gave out and I fell on the couch, right on top of the remote control. The TV turned on and I heard a familiar voice. "A fateful accident helped me catch a criminal." Dean replied to the reporter. I turned up the volume and stared at the screen. What? Next to Dean was Rick. The cuffs on him. Dean said that he had been chasing Surgeon Rick for many years, but in the end, his girlfriend helped him catch the criminal. My thoughts were confused. Tears welled up in my eyes from despair. Perhaps fate really exists, and you can't fight it, and soon the mobsters would find me. At that moment, there was an insistent knock on the door. I took out my phone and wanted to call the police, but I just looked at my reflection in the mirror and said to myself, "Let fate decide for itself." Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you. I was lying on an operating table in the garage that smelled of mildew. Maybe it's not too late to give up, but it took me so long to get there. No, I have to become an anime beauty. The surgeon held up a mask with anesthesia. All I had to do was to breathe in and wake up a different person with a new face. It all started a month ago when Chris was transferred to our class. That's a pretty boy. Blue eyes, bangs. He looked like a character from an anime. But I immediately realized that I was not going to get anything. I was dark, short, and I could not even put two words together at the sight of a pretty guy. And suddenly Chris, walking to his seat, smiled at me. I immediately blushed. Did he really pay attention to someone like me? If this was the case, then I had a chance to communicate with him or even. But how? I immediately asked for advice from Steve, my next-door neighbor and only friend. But for some reason, Steve got upset and mumbled that I shouldn't worry. It was enough to be myself. So much for the advice. Chris instantly became friends with all the cool guys in the class. They were always hanging out together, and I was even afraid to get close to him. It was only at the end of the week after school that he stayed in class for a while. This was my chance. I saw a beautiful sticker with an anime girl on his phone. Went up to him and asked what it meant. Chris immediately replied that it was the emblem of the anime fan club that he headed. I wanted to continue the conversation, but then Chris was called by his friends from the class and ran away. I followed him out. My friend Steve was waiting for me in the hallway, and we went home together, as usual. All the way I kept talking about Chris being an otaku. And then I came up with a wild idea. If I looked like an anime girl from a sticker, then for sure he would like me. Steve remained silent. Strange. He was usually more talkative. But suddenly he blurted out, since this Chris was so important to me, he would help. A friend of his worked at an anime store, and Steve would arrange a discount for me. Cool. I went straight there after school. I picked up a bunch of different clothes and a special shiny powder. The next day, everyone in the class looked at me in disbelief. I was embarrassed to be standing in the middle of the hallway in an anime outfit myself, but it was all for Chris. Then Chris himself came up to me. I was happy. But he said that the outfit did not suit me, and I looked in it like a parody of his favorite anime. There were chuckles all around. He was right. I was ugly. I was so devastated that I didn't even go back to class. I went home and turned on an anime to see what I had done wrong. But after that, it became even more painful. The cartoon girls were beautiful, with perfect figures, small noses, and huge eyes. If only I could look like them. In desperation, I went to wash my face, and then I saw an advertising flyer in the basket. My mother must have picked it up on the way home. It showed that with the help of a special tape, you can adjust the shape of the nose and eyes. Bingo! I rushed to the store. And then I worked all evening, and in the morning, I looked just like those anime beauties. The tape tightened the skin terribly. I was afraid that it would fall away and furtively touched my face. I ran into Steve in the hallway, but instead of complimenting me on how much I had changed, he asked dumbfounded what I had done to myself. Get off me, Steve. You don't understand anything. So much for the friend. The physical education class was beginning. When I appeared in the hall, everyone gasped, and Chris immediately came up to me and even offered to run together. It worked! We were chatting, and I tried not to show my excitement, but when Chris invited me to a party in 3 weeks, I almost fell over. Of course I told him yes. We made a circle around the room. I was sweating. Sweat was even running down my face. And then Chris looked at me strangely. What's wrong? It turned out that the damn tape had peeled off and was dangling. It was a failure. I tried to run away and carefully asked Chris if his invitation was still valid. But he just grinned and brazenly said that now he would invite me if only I would have plastic surgery. And he was sure that this would not help me either. Then he defiantly left. I was desperate. At home, I locked myself in my room, and I was afraid to even look at my ugly face in the mirror. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door, and I rushed to open it. Maybe it was Chris who came to apologize, but of course not. How naive I was. Steve stood in the doorway, flowers in hand. He kept saying I was beautiful, which made me even angrier. I am ugly, and you need to see a doctor to check your eyesight. He wanted to say something else, but in a fit of anger, I slammed the door. I turned off my phone and watched anime for days. I kept thinking about Chris. I dreamed about him, and I even woke up screaming his name. It seemed I was obsessed with him. Or maybe I was sick. Soon, YouTube gave me a new video. The heroine of the show was a woman who had dozen surgeries, and she looked like a monster. Yes, there are people. Stop! So after all, you can probably make anyone out of yourself. And even an anime character? And then the thought of the surgery took me seriously, and I immediately remembered Chris's last words. The party was 2 weeks away. I'll make it, and then Chris will be mine. The very next day, I rushed to call the clinics. But no one would operate on me because of my age. Well, no, I just wouldn't give up. I got into the darknet. Here I could definitely find everything. And I came across the website of a doctor. He was working illegally. I was scared, but I decided to call him anyway. The doctor agreed to operate on me, but it cost $500, and where could I get that much money? Then I remembered that in the anime store where I bought clothes, there was an ad urgently needed animator. I rushed there, but there was already a whole crowd of youngsters dreaming of getting this place. It was easy money. I had no choice but to call Steve. The shop was run by an acquaintance of his. I lied to him that I needed money for cute anime shoes. Steve listened in silence and said dryly that he would help, but only if I went to the party with him and not with Chris. I almost choked. We're friends, but there was nothing to do, and I agreed. An hour later, I was already pulling a Totoro costume. It's one of the cult heroes of anime. If I distributed leaflets for 12 hours a day, I would collect the necessary amount in a week without any problems. But after an hour on the street, I was ready to give up. It was very hot in the suit. Besides, they didn't take any single leaflet from me. A block from the store, I came across the fairground. Here I met great success. The flyers were being snapped up, but suddenly someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned to see a huge man in a similar Totoro suit standing in front of me. He said it was his territory, and I'd better get out. I don't think so, damn Totoro. Then a fight broke out between us. We were lying on the ground, awkwardly squirming in these suits, until our boss came running at the noise. I thought he was going to punish the bastard, but he just threw me out without paying a cent. I trudged home, smearing sweat and dirt on my face. And where could I earn money for the surgery? It's over. When I got home, I automatically reached into the closet for clean clothes. Then the only clothes from the store fell out on me, from where I was kicked out in disgrace. I shuddered with hatred for the boss. I worked through the day in a stupid suit, and he didn't even pay. What should I do? Time was short and I needed money for the surgery. And then I remembered that when I was changing, he closed the cash register, and it was full of money. I think I have a plan. And at that moment, Steve called, just in time. I told him everything. I didn't get paid at the damn store, which meant he wouldn't be partying with me unless he was going to help me in the robbery. Steve was horrified and tried to talk me out of it. Then I called him a coward and hung up. Handsome Chris would definitely not behave like this. Well, I would do it myself. I found an crowbar in my father's garage and went to the store that evening. After waiting for the boss to lock the door, I put on the mask of the anime villain, Shishio Makoto, and crept to the window. And then someone took me by the shoulder. I was stunned with fear. Steve was standing behind me. He took the crowbar from me, saying that the whole neighborhood would come running at the sound of the glass, and handed me the keys. He managed to steal them from his friend. Wow, Steve, did you decide to help me? We quickly entered the store. I grabbed the money and we immediately left. Half an hour later, we were walking home through the park and I was so happy. In my joy, I even blurted out to Steve that now I had enough for the surgery. I would be a real anime girl. Hearing this, Steve turned pale and he said that he understood everything. I used him. After that, Steve turned around and quickly went home. For a second, I wondered if I'd done the right thing with Steve, but I tried to push all these thoughts away. Soon, Chris would appreciate my efforts, and I definitely wouldn't worry anymore. The next day, I went to the surgeon. I exhaled and walked into the garage where my surgery was supposed to take place. Man, what a measly hole. I hoped I didn't get infected with something here. The lamp blinked, and the anesthetic mask looked like an instrument of torture. I lay down on the table and squeezed my eyes shut, and the surgeon held up a mask with anesthesia. Am I doing this just to please some guy? I thought at the last second. Suddenly there was a crash. Someone broke in the door. It was Steve. He shouted at the surgeon to get away from me and that he was going to call the cops and literally dragged me out of the garage. I resisted, but then Steve pulled his phone out of his pocket. What kind of nonsense was this? But then I saw how in a fresh video, Chris made fun of my photos and anime costumes in front of his friends. He said they got to him by constantly trying to become an anime girl. But I was just a freak. Something inside me snapped. Oh my god, all this time, he was just making fun of me, and I almost disfigured myself. But then the cops came running out of the dark and handcuffed Steve. The owner of the anime store recognized him from the camera footage, and Steve was tracked down. No, wait! I saw Steve being led away and I knew he was doing everything for me. But now they were going to take him to the police because of me. I made up my mind and I shouted at the cops that I'd made Steve do it for me. After that, we were taken to the police station together. I was very afraid that we would be sent to prison, but since we were minors, we were eventually given a month of correctional labor. On the first day, we carried bags of garbage, but even here, Steve tried to help me. At the end of the day, it started to rain and we were exhausted waiting for the bus. It looked just like a shot from Totoro. I wanted to say this to Steve, but he suddenly turned to me and kissed me. And suddenly, despite my appearance, I felt the happiest in the world. And I realized that all this time, there was a person who appreciated and accepted me for who I was. I cried with happiness. At that moment, the bus arrived. Did you like the video? Then subscribe and like it. Support the channel. Thank you!